So it's Monday the 23rd today. We've got the airbox back from our fabricator. It's been welded onto the throttle bodies just to reduce the height of everything, and a little bit to keep things out of the way. The injectors have been gone through, and as you can see over here, the bike's not looking too proud at the moment. So we blew a head gasket up at the qualifier due to a poor coolant tank design, which wasn't dissipating the heat very well. So we've had to have that rushed off and and rebuilt. So we're picking that up tomorrow. Just a little montage here of us racing to get things done in time, ready for 3 weeks' time, which is the British Masters. So yeah, going to involve some of the reassembly processes and what this looks like when it's all done. So I've got one of the fuel injection rails here in the parts washer. They've been sat for a little while, so there's bound to have been some dust that's accumulated inside of them. So what I'm going to do, just to help keep the injector filters nice and clean, is run this through the parts washer, airline it out, and do it all again with carb cleaner just to help get rid of everything. So a couple short minutes later, we've got the primary injectors back in the throttle bodies. Pretty simple job here. It's just an interference fit with an upper O-ring, and at the bottom down here there's a rubber circular grommet which sits in a groove, and the fuel pressure is what helps it seat into the bottom there to ensure there are no air leaks. You can see here I've got the injectors labelled 1, 2, 3 and 4. That's because even though you select the same size for all the injectors, there are tolerances which they work between. So when the fuel mapping is undertaken, basically you're pairing 1 and 5 together. So that's the primary injector for cylinder number 1, that's the secondary injector. And you can see now we've got the secondary injector rail on, secured just by 2 bolts up there, and the fuel fitting there has been inserted. It's going to come off and be clean, but I was just test fitting it because the height changed. I didn't know if the pipe had enough flex in it, but it does, so shut off. So it's Wednesday the 25th now. We received the engine late yesterday evening and got it mocked up just back in the chassis, sat on a block. As you can see, we've got the top mounting bolt in, and the lower mounting bolt down there is also in place now. So I've just got to work on getting these turdy aluminium plates in, which I'm not too much of a fan of, but they will. So you join me now a couple of hours on. I've got the battery box. This is our little sump extension with the lines there connected down to the sump. Just got to do up the bottom Super Jubilees there. Started putting the wiring loom back on. That's all got to be just cable tied up and back secure. Same with the bottom injectors. Next on the list for me is get the old radiator off, get the new old one on, and then see where we can fit an oil cooler alongside that one. Some point the fuel tank's going to have to come off because I've noticed there's just really fine particulates of dirt which have made their way through the filter into the fuel tank at the moment, which is no good, so that's got to come off as well. But yeah, we're making progress. So we've made pretty good progress today, and you might be thinking, you know, what's he making a video about saying there's a big whole rush to get this bike ready? You know, all we've got to do is put the headers on, get some hoses sorted for the radiator, and we're off. But unfortunately there's a little bit more to it than that. As a result of the head gasket failure we had from the overheating, we're going a bit, you know, probably most would say overkill on cooling now as a result of that. So we've got a fan coming, which is going to sit here, and we've had an oil cooler custom made which is going to go here. Now that does mean we have to completely redo the oil line. Currently we've just got it looped. The previous owner had it blocked off, so it was actually starving the engine of oil every time it ran, which wasn't very good. So it's a step in the right direction, but like I say, we're going to put an oil cooler on it, which means all new oil lines. We've got to get this properly mounted, and then we've got a clearancing issue with the front fender here. So that's going to have to be pushed forward, and then we're going to have to trim the top of that off. Alongside that, as you can see, we were given this radiator by one of our sponsors. It's not brand new, it is second hand, but it was a good quality brand, which is why we're using it. We're going to have to get that boy lopped off, and as you can see, this bend here actually sits above this, and that will be our, or should be, the highest point of the cooling system. So as a result of that, we're going to have our coolant tank in here removed. We're going to lop off this current cap, and then we're going to have a 40-degree angle put on it and kicked up to about here, so it sits above our bend. so the radiator functions properly and we don't end up with a nice big air pocket, which will then cause us to have coolant problems again. Yeah. So yeah, a fair old bit of work left to do, to be honest with you, and it is going to be a push. So I've just started mocking up an engine mount. Just made out of some doubled up CR4 mild steel, so I'm getting through welding it together here. I've done the first pass, going to wait for it to cool off now, and then run in and do the sides, then flip it over and get the back side. This is going to go from here and then catch into these two bolts here. I'm going to have to recess it for this, but yeah, you can see there's one over on that side there, and we need another one over here. The plate that was on it is pretty shagged and buckled, so it's not really doing its job, which is why I'm making another one out of stronger steel. So a bit of a further progress update. Cracking on a little bit with this. I got the sides done. Just waiting for the part to cool off now so I can carry on finishing up my beads there at the top. In the meantime, whilst waiting and doing other little bits, the fan has arrived, so we've got that mounted. It's not a perfect fit, it does overhang on one side a little bit, but I'd rather it be bigger than too small, especially considering we're going to have an oil cooler back here as well. So yeah, everything is coming together quite nicely today. So I've just wired in our little fan here, and I've got to finish tidying up the wiring for it, but it sure works. So the benefit of this fan is that you can reverse the polarity on it. So when we're riding, it's going to be drawing air through the radiator from the back side, which is the cool side. It will help cool the exhaust manifold slightly as well, because we're going to have our front guard here, so the nice cool air should rush around and keep the headers cool as well. And then when we're back in the pits, what we usually do is take the front guard off, and then we will reverse the polarity of the fan and have it drawing cool air and blowing it through the radiator. So yeah, neat little setup hopefully. So it's now the 21st of September, unfortunately. We're back where we started at the British Masters on the 12th of September. We took the bike out in practice for our first practice session. It all seemed to be going rather well. However, on the second lap, started feeling some funny vibrations through the handlebars and a knocking noise coming from the engine. So I clutched it and shut her off straight away, probably within about 5 seconds. And then upon further investigation back to the pits, it was pretty clear that we'd had some kind of lubrication failure in the engine and we'd damaged at least one of these shells, one of the rod shells connecting to the crankshaft. So that was our day over, which was absolutely gutting for all of us, obviously, and it just means more money's got to be spent. We took the engine out on the day and got it taken over to our engine builders the next day, which was Monday. So I think I was driving for 9.5, 10 hours total Monday after the shambles of our British Masters, just to get the engine over to the engine builders and then get back home. For people in the Grasstrack community who might be watching this, speculating, saying it's because we had not drilled out one of the oil galleries in the crankcase to 11.5 mil. That is incorrect. It's not the case. This engine ran for 3 meetings without having an oil way drilled. It ran with the oil cooler lines looped instead. I've been told by other people that that's impossible and you cannot do it. However, this is a K8 engine, not the typical K6 to K1 that is utilised, and the oil ways are different. It does not need to be drilled. In fact, when we ran the first set of engine cases that came with the bike, the oil lines were blocked off and that oil way was not drilled out, and the bike still ran. So yeah, they're pretty hard going engines with a good oiling system, these K8 engines. It was in fact the oil pressure relief valve that failed. The failure of that caused us to lose all oil pressure, which then obviously ruined the oil clearances, preventing main shells from being welded to the rod, which is exactly what ended up happening. So as a result of that, it's junked our crankshaft, which was about 30 minutes new, and it's taken out a rod with it as well. That's as far as the damage went because I shut it off early enough. The crankcases fortunately haven't been damaged, so it's not a total write-off for us, but again, it is just another expense that we didn't really need. It's quite frustrating for us, not just because it was a big meeting, but also because in order to get there, the bike had been coming to and from work with me in the back of my van, and I was working on it in my lunch break, so it literally was flat out to the last minute to get it all ready. In fact, we spent, I think, 3 or 4 hours working on the Saturday before the Masters, just to try and make sure that everything was as prepared as it possibly could be. But unfortunately, that wasn't enough for us. So our steps going forward, once we've found the cause of the problem, to go back to that, basically, like I said, the oil pressure relief valve failed. However, it failed due to a modification made by the bloke who has built this chassis in order to make the sump fit. When the sump was cut down, they cut and shut part of the oil pressure relief support system, and that failed. When it failed, as I said, we lost oil pressure. This isn't something that I'm willing to have a repeat of for obvious reasons, and I'm not content with doing what everybody else thinks is right, which isn't right, and that's drilling into the crankcases and blocking off the oil cooler lines. I will be running an oil cooler. With the fuel injection, we're revving the bike harder, higher. It's producing more power and in turn produces more heat. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the bike, like for like, does run cooler, but when you're up in the higher RPMs, which is exactly what you'll reach when racing, producing more power, but because we're burning more fuel, it does indeed get quite hot, and I will be running an oil cooler because it's honestly more important to keep the bloody oil cool than it is to keep the coolant cool. So I'll keep you up to date with what it takes to get that oiling system sorted. I won't say too much for now. We know what we're going to do, but actions speak louder than words, so yeah, we'll wait and see.